Hello everybody, and before I'm reading you the books, just a little top tip. Me and my friends, who are only 8 years old, and one of them is 9, are making our own book called Alex Jackson. Took by the names Alex Ryder and Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson's surname, Jackson, and Alex Ryder's first name, Alex. Alex and Jackson put together. It could be Alex Jackson Alex or Alex Jackson, but we chose Alex Jackson. So yeah, little thing I'll be reading the book that what we've written so far, which is only a few pages. Let's say 3 pages. So it won't be long. We've only written 3 pages. I've done most of the writing. My friend has also done the rest of the writing. Oh, I just want to give names. Can't. Well, just read, okay? But yeah, there's just a little something about that. It's going to be a new video that I'm going to be putting up, okay? Let's just keep reading. Chapter 10. What? Ho. What ho. Major Winston Yu selected an egg and crust sandwich and held it delicately between his gloved fingers. He was at the Ritz Hotel in London, which, even if they did allow him and tourists into the main rooms, was still his favourite hotel in the world. And tea was definitely his favourite meal. He loved the little sandwiches cut in perfect triangles, with a scone served with jam and cream to follow. It was also very English, and the bone china teapot and cup had been made by Wedgwood, the Staffordshire family firm established in 1759. He sipped his tea and dabbed his lips with a serviette. The news from Bangkok, he had to admit, was not good, but he wasn't going to let that spoil his tea. His mother had always told him that every cloud has a silver lining, and he was looking for one now. It was true that it wouldn't be easy to replace Annan Sukkot. But on the other hand, every organisation, even a snakehead, needs a change of personnel from time to time. From time to time. It keeps people on their toes. There were plenty of young lieutenants who deserved promotion. You would make a choice in due course. Much less welcome the man sitting opposite him. It was very rare for the 2 members of Scorpia to be seen together in public, but Zeljan Kirst had telephoned him and insisted on a meeting. Major had suggested the Ritz, but now he felt it had been a mistake. The big Yugoslavian, with his bald head and restless shoulders, couldn't have looked more out of place. And he was drinking mineral water. Who drank mineral water at 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Why didn't you report to us about the boy? Kirst asked. I didn't think it was relevant, he replied. Not relevant? This is my operation. I have everything under control. That's not what I've heard. It didn't surprise you that the executive board had already learned about the destruction of the China Trading Company offices and the death of Sukkot. They were always watching one another's backs. Dowell was working out where to place the knives. He was sad that criminals weren't the same anymore. No one trusted anyone. We're still not sure what has just happened. He said it might be tea time in England, but it was midnight in Bangkok. It's not even clear the boy was responsible. This is Alex Ryder, Kirst snaps. We underestimated him once before, but it was an expensive mistake. Why haven't you killed him already? For obvious reasons. Yu's hand hovered over another sandwich, but he changed his mind. He had rather lost his appetite. I was aware of Alex Ryder's presence in Bangkok the moment he landed, he continued. I knew they were coming, a boy and a man, even before they arrived. Who told you? Who told you? That's my secret, and I intend to keep it that way. I could have arranged to have the Ryder child gunned down at Suvarnabhumi Airport. It would have been simple, but that would have told ASIS I was aware of their plans. They already suspect I have inside information. This would have confirmed it. So what do you intend to do? I want to play with him. The fight at the arena was just the beginning, and there's no real harm done. The place was falling down anyway, but if you ask me, the situation is quite amusing. Here's the famous Alex Ryder dressed up as an Afghan refugee. He thinks he's so clever. But I have him in the palm of my hand, and I can crush him at any time. That was what Julia Rothman thought. He's a child, Mr. Curse. Very clever child, but a child all the same. I think you're overreacting. Something deadly figured in Curse's sight, and you made a mental note not to eat anything more. You wouldn't put it past Scorpio to slip a radioactive pellet into an egg and cress sandwich. After all, they'd done it before. We will be monitoring the situation, Curse said at length. And I'm warning you, Miss Major, if we feel that things are getting out of hand, you will be replaced. He got up and left. You say where he was, thinking about what had just been said. He suspected that Levy Kroll was behind this. The Azrael had been playing power games ever since Max Grendel had retired. He'd also volunteered for the Reef Island business. He'd be itching to move if you failed. He was not going to fail. Royal Blue had been thoroughly tested by US operatives in Bangkok. The detonating system had been adapted, and in less than 2 days' time, it would set off on the next leg of its journey, all according to the plan. But you decided to take out a little insurance. He alone would set off the bomb. He was the one who would take the credit for the worldwide destruction that would follow. So how to stop Kroll from seizing control? It was very simple. A technological tinkering, and nobody would be able to replace him. You smiled himself and called for the bill. I should never have let you go, Ash exclaimed. I can't believe I let them do that to you. It was 1 o'clock in the morning in Bangkok, and Alex and Ash were in their room on the 3rd floor. Alex had abandoned the ferry downriver on the other side of an ugly modern bridge. From there, he'd have to find his way across the city on foot, dripping wet, without money and relying only on a sense of direction. He had stopped twice to ask for directions from a monk and from a stall holder, closing up for the night. They spoke little English, but were able to understand enough to point to him in the right direction. Even so, it had been well after midnight by the time he had reached Chinatown. Ash had been pacing the room like a lion in a cage, sick with worry, and had grabbed hold of Alex when he finally arrived. He had listened to the story with disbelief. I shouldn't have let you go, he said again. You weren't to know. I've heard about these fights. Snakeheads hold them all the time. Anyone who crosses them can end up in a ring. People get crippled or killed. I was lucky. You were smart, Alex. Ash looked at him, really as if seeing him in a new light. You say someone was there shooting? They attacked the building. Do you see who they were? You won't find very much of it left. I was thinking the same thing about our assignment. Ash threw down a spoon. I'm not blaming you for what happened last night, he said. But it may be that our friends in the Snakehead have no further interest in smuggling us into Australia. While their main lieutenant is dead, and it has to be said, you took out a large chunk of their operation. I didn't set fire to the building, I protested. No, but you pulled it into the river. That put the fire out. Ash half smiled. Fair point, but I need to find out how things stand. Can I come? Absolutely not, Alex. I think that's a bad idea. You go back to the room and watch out for yourself. It's always possible they'll send someone round to settle the score. I'll be back as soon as I can. He walked off. Alex thought back over what he'd just said. Was Ash angry with him? It was difficult to read his moves, as if a life in the Secret Service. The Secret Service had put a display of emotion under the wraps, but Alex could see that things hadn't quite gone as expected. His job was to infiltrate the Snakehead, not start a war with it. And the fake papers that were so important, Ash might be sitting on the bottom of the river. And the rest of Cheddar Trading Company with them. Ash got to his feet and began to walk slowly along the street, barely glancing at the brightly coloured silks that every shop in this area seemed to sell. Thigh high streets certainly weren't like English ones. In England, things were spread out. Here you had whole classes of shops, all selling the same thing. Whole streets of silk, whole streets of ceramics. He wondered how many people chose where to go. He wished Ash had let him go with him. The truth was, he didn't want to spend any more time on his own, and he didn't have enough of Bangkok. As for his hopes that meeting Ash would tell him anything about himself. So far, all he had been given was a few glimpses of the past. He was beginning to wonder if his godfather would ever open up enough to say anything meaningful at all. And if just approaching the top of the alleyway when he realised that the entrance was being watched. Ash warned to keep his eyes open, and perhaps it was thanks to him that Alex spotted the man on the other side of the road, half hidden behind a vegetable stall. He didn't need to look twice. The man had changed his clothes. Gone were the red poppy and the leather jacket. But Alex was absolutely certain. This is the same square, hard face that he always seen at the airport. Then again at the Peninsula at the hotel. Now he was here. He must have been trailing Alex for days. The man had disguised himself as a tourist, complete with camera and baseball cap. But his attention was fixed on the building where Alex and Ash were staying. Perhaps he was waiting for them to come out. Once again, Alex had the feeling that he knew the man from somewhere, but where? In which country? Could it be one of his old enemies catching up with him? He examined the cold, dark eyes beneath the fringe of the back hair. A soldier! Alex was just about to make the action when the man turned and began to walk away. He must have decided that there was no one at home. Alex made a snap decision. To hell with what? Ash had told him he was going to follow. The man had settled down Yawata Road, and one of the busiest streets in Chinatown. One of the busiest streets in Chinatown with huge signs carrying Chinese characters high in the air. Alice was confident it wouldn't be seen as ever. The pavement was flooded with stalls. As if the man glanced back, he could find somewhere to hide in an instant. The real danger was that Alex might lose him. Despite the early hour, the crowds were already out. They formed a constantly shifting barrier between the two of them, and the man could disappear all too easily into a dozen entrances. There were shops selling golden and spices, cafes and restaurants, arcades and tiny alleys. The trick was to stay close enough not to lose him, but far enough away not to be seen. But the man didn't suspect anything. His pace hadn't changed. He took a right turn, then a left, and suddenly they were out of Chinatown and heading into the old city, the very heart of Bangkok, where every street seemed to contain a temple or a shrine. The pavements were empty here, and Alex had to be more careful, dropping further back and hovering close to doorways or parked cars in case he had to duck out of sight. They'd been walking for about 10 minutes when the man turned off, passing through the entrance to a large temple complex. The gateway itself was decorated with silver and mother of pearl, and opened up onto a courtyard filled with shrines and statues of fantastic, richly decorated worldwide myths and religion collided in a cloud of incense and a blaze of gold and brilliantly coloured mosaic. The Thai word for a Buddhist monastery or temple is Wat. There are 30,000 of them scattered across the country, hundreds in Bangkok alone. There was a sign outside this one, giving its name in Thai and hopefully in English. It was called Wat Ho. Alex only had a few moments to take in his surroundings. The ornamental ponds and the body trees which grow in every Wat, but because they once gave shelter to the Buddha, He glanced at the golden figures, half woman, half lion, that guarded the main temple. The delicate slanting roofs and mondrops, incredible, intricate towers with hundreds of tiny figures that must have taken office or a smart private bank. The walls were covered in wooden panels. There was an antique table with a lamp, a fan turning overhead, and more bizarre than anything, on the opposite wall, a picture of Queen Elizabeth II. Queen Elizabeth II. In my time, she's alive right now. Maybe to your time, she may not, but she's a queen. Queen Elizabeth II. As Alex made his way in, he hesitated, allowing the man to catch up. Then suddenly punched backwards with his elbow and brought his fist swinging round. It was a move he had been taught when he was training with the SAS and the Bregan Beacons in Wales. The elbow jab winds your man. The first carries the gun aside, giving you time to spin round and kick out with all your strength. Never try it in the open because you'll end up getting shot. It only works in a confined space. But not this time. The man seemed to have been expecting the manoeuvre. He simply stepped aside the moment Alex began his move. Alex's first strike didn't make contact with anything. And before he could even turn, he felt the cold ferrule of the gun pressing against the side of his head. "Nice try, cub," the man said, "but much too slow." And that was when Alex knew. "Box!" he exclaimed. The gun didn't matter anymore. Alex turned to face the man, who was now grinning at him like an old friend, which in a sense he was. Two of them had actually met in Bregan Beacons. There had been 4 men in the new night to which Alex had been assigned: Wolf, Eagle, Snake, and Fox. None of them had been allowed to use their real names. While he was with them, Alex was Cub. And now he thought about it, there had been one with a Liverpudlian accent. It seemed incredible that the two of them should have met up again in Bangkok, but there could be no doubt about it. Fox was standing in front of him now. "You're at the airport," Alex said. "I saw you wearing a poppy." "Yes, I should have taken that off, but I'd just flown in from London." "And you're at the Peninsula Hotel?" Fox nodded. "I couldn't believe it. It was you. When I first saw you, so I followed you to be sure. I've been keeping an eye on you. Yeah, listen, Alex, lucky for you. Last night, Alex said something. Was that you at the arena? You set the place on fire?" I followed you over to Patpong. I was there when those men picked you up. Then I followed you down to the Cheddar Trading Company. It wasn't easy, I can tell you, and it took me ages to weasel my way in. When I arrived, you were already in the ring. I thought you were going to be beaten to a pulp, but I seen where the main fuses were, so I nipped back and turned out all the lights. And I came looking for you. Things got a bit dodgy. When the lights came back on, I had to shoot a few of the opposition and chuck a couple of grenades. The last time I saw you, you were in a ferry trying to get away. It might have helped if you untied it first. You shot Anand Sukit. Was that his name? Well, he was trying to shoot you. It was the very least I could do. So, what is this place? Had he looked around him? What are you doing in Bangkok? And what's your real name? You can't go on expecting me to call you Fox. My name's Ben Daniels. You're Alex Ryder. Of course I know that now. You've left the SAS. I go second to MI6 Special Operations. Since you asked, that's where you are now. This is what you might call the Bangkok office of the Royal and General Bank. The words were hardly out of his mouth when the door opened on the other side of the hallway and a woman walked out. Alex caught it at once. A faint smell of peppermint. "Alex Ryder!" Miss Jones exclaimed. I have to say, you're the last person I expected to see. Come into my office immediately. I want to know why you aren't at school. Chapter 11. Armed and Dangerous. The last time Alex had seen Miss Jones, she had been visiting him in a North London hospital. Then she had seen him unsure of herself. Regretful, blaming herself for the security lapse that had left Alex close to death in the pavement outside the MI6 offices in Liverpool Street. She had also been at her most human. Now she was much more like the woman he had first met, dressed heavily in a slate-coloured jacket and dress with a single necklace that could have been silver or steel. Her hair was still cut short, and her face, with those night black eyes, was utterly serious. Miss Jones was not attractive, but then she did not try to be. In a way, her looks exactly suited her work as deputy head of MI6 Special Operations, one of the most secretive departments of the British Secret Service. They gave nothing away. Once again, she was sucking the peppermint. Alex wondered if she had given up smoking at some point, or was the habit also related to her job. Right when Miss Jones spoke, people sometimes died. It wouldn't surprise him if she felt the need to sweeten her breath. The two of them were sitting in an office on the first floor of the building that stood directly behind What Ho. It was a very ordinary room with a wooden table and three leather chairs. Two large square windows looked out over the temple courtyard, nicely that all this could be deceptive. The glass was probably bulletproof. There would be hidden cameras and microphones. And how many agents were there? Mingling among the orange-robed monks. When it came to MI6, nothing was ever quite what it seemed. Ben Daniels, the man he had known as Fox, was also there. He was younger than Alex, had first thought, no more than 22 or 23, laid back and thoughtful. He was sitting next to Alex. The two of them were opposite Miss Jones, who had taken her place behind the table. Alex had told her the history from the time he had splashed down off the Australian coast by his recruitment by ASIS, his meeting with Ash in Bangkok, and his first encounter with the Snakehead. He noticed that she reacted uncomfortably at the mention of Ash. But then, of course, she must have known him. She had been at MI6 when his father was undercover with Scorpia. I hope you've all heard my video about Scorpia. If you haven't, you probably aren't doing the right thing. You should have read it by now. Before you read this is the 7th book. And Scorpia, was the 5th book. You better read Scorpia if you want to know this. If you already listened to my Scorpia books, you have highness all. Right, so, when it came to nothing, Ben Daniels, he was a historian from the time he splashed up, meeting Ash in front. Okay, he noted that she reacted uncomfortably at the top mention of Ash, but then of course she must have known him. She had been at MI6 when his father was undercover with Scorpia. She might even have been involved in his operation in Malta that had brought him safely home. Well, Eastenbrook certainly has a nerve, she remarked when he had finished. Recruiting you without so much as a by your leave. You could have talked to us first. I don't work for you, Alex said. I know you don't, Alex, but that's not the point. At the very least, you're a British citizen, and if a foreign agency is going to use you, it ought to ask. She softened lightly. For that matter, whatever you prompted to go back into the field, I thought you'd have enough of all this. I wanted to meet Ash, Alex said. Then I thought occurred to him. Why did you never tell me about him? He asked. Why should I have? I haven't seen him for years. But he worked for you. He worked for Special Operations at the same time as me. In fact, I had very little to do with him. I met him once or twice, that's all. Do you know what happened in Malta? Miss Jones hesitated. You'd have to ask Alan Blunt, she said. That was his operation. You know, it was all set up. John, your father, was pretending to work for Scorpio, and we had to get him back. We set up a fake ambush in a place called Medina, but it went wrong and Ash was nearly killed. After that, he was confined to desk duty, and not long after your parents died, he left the service. That's what I can tell you. Where's Mr. Blunt? He's in London, so why are you here? Miss Jones looked at Alex curiously. You've changed, she said. You've grown up a lot. I suppose we're to thank for that. You know, Alex, we weren't going to use you again. Alan and I had agreed after what happened with Scorpio that was going to be the end of it. But the next thing we learned, you were in America, up to your neck in it with the CIA. I ought to congratulate you, by the way. The business with the Archangel space station was quite remarkable. Thank you. And now I say ASIS. You certainly get around. Miss Jones reached forward and flipped open a file lying on the table in front of her. It's strange that we should have run into you this way, she went on. Maybe, but it may be less of a coincidence that you think Major you. Does that name mean anything to you? He's in charge of the Snakehead. Ethan Brooke had told Alex the name when he was in Sydney. Well, to answer your question, we're investigating him. That's why I'm here. That's why Daniels is here too. Miss Jones tapped the file with her index finger. How much did ASIS tell you about Major U? Alex shrugged. He felt uncomfortable, suddenly caught in the middle of the two rival intelligence agencies. Not very much, he admitted. They don't seem to know a lot about him. That's part of my job. Or maybe I can help you. Miss Jones paused. Well, we've been interested in Major Winston Yu for some time, although we haven't managed to find out too much about him ourselves. We know he had a Chinese mother. His father is unknown. He was brought up in poverty in Hong Kong. His mother worked in a hotel, like my dad, but cut forward 8 years. And you would find him being privately educated in England. He went to Harrow School, for heaven's sake. His mother managed to afford the fees is another. How is mother managed to afford the fees is another question. He was an average student. He had the copies of his reports. We have copies of his reports. On the other hand, he seems to have fitted in quite well, which is surprising considering his background. There was question marks over a rather nasty incident that took place at the end of the second term. A boy killed in a car accident, but nothing was ever proved. He was also very good at sport, a triple house blood, whatever that means. He left with reasonable A-levels and read politics at London University, gained a second-class degree. After that, he went into the army, trained at Sandhurst, and did much better there. He seemed to have taken to the army life and achieved the highest score in military, practically and academic studies, for which he received the Queen's Medal. He joined one of our country's most distinguished regiments, the Household Cavalry, I think. I'm not sure how you say it. Household Cavalry, and did their tours in Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, he developed a bone condition which brought an end to his army career. But he was snapped up by intelligence, and for a time he worked for MI6, not special operations. He was fairly low grade, gathering and processing information, that sort of thing. Well, eventually he must have had enough of it, because one day he disappeared. We know he has been active in Thailand and Australia, but there's no record of his activities, and it's only recent that we've been able to identify him as the leader of one of the most powerful snakeheads in the region. Miss Jones paused. When she looked up again, her eyes were bleak. This may put you off, Alex. It may even persuade you to go home. And believe me, I won't blame you. According to our sources, Major, you may have contacts with Scorpio. It seems possible that he's on the executive board. Scorpio. Alice had hoped he would never hear that name again, and Miss Jones was right. If Ethan Brooke had given him that information, he might have thought twice about the whole thing. He wondered if the head of the ASIS covert action had known. Almost certainly, ASISCA should be, but it's not. Almost certainly, but he needed Alex, so he decided to keep it under his hat. You still haven't told me why you're interested in him. Alex said, That's top secret. Miss Jones just with the one hand. But I'll tell you, apart from anything else, it may well be that you're in a position to help us. Assuming that's something you consider. Anyway, I'll explain and you can make up your own mind. Have you ever heard of the daisy cutter? I thought for a moment. It's a bomb. He remembered talking about it at school during his history. The Americans used it in Vietnam. They also used it in Afghanistan, Miss Jones said. Daisy cutter, also known as Blue 82B or the Blue Boy, is the largest conventional bomb in existence. It's the size of a car, and I mean a 5-seater. Each bomb contains 12,500 pounds of ammonium nitrate, aluminium powder, and polystyrene. And it's powerful enough to destroy an entire building easily. In fact, it'll probably take out a whole street. The Americans used it because it's terrifying. Daniel muttered, "You speaking for the first time? It may not compare to a nuclear bomb, but there's nothing on earth like it. The shockwave that it releases is unbelievable. Well, you'd have no idea how much damage it can do." They used it in Vietnam to clear landing sites for helicopters, Miss Jones went on. Drop one on jungle and you have no jungle for half a mile around. They called it the daisy cutter because that was the pattern the explosion made. It was used in Afghanistan to scare the Taliban, to show them what they were up against. What's this got to do with Major You? Alex asked. He was also wondering, with a sense of growing unease, what it might have to do with him. For the last few years, the British government had been developing a second generation of daisy cutters, Miss Jones explained. Scientists have managed to create a similar type of bomb, except it's a little smaller and it's more powerful, with an even greater shockwave. They gave it a code name, Royal Blue, and built a prototype at a secret laboratory just outside London. She took out a peppermint, twisted off the wrapper with a single blue off her thumb and forefinger. 4 weeks ago, the prototype that was stolen. 8 of our people were killed. 3 of them were security guards, the rest were technicians. It was a very professional operation, perfectly timed, ruthless, executed. She sipped the peppermint between her arms. And you think Major You, these things aren't easy to transport, Alex. They need to be carried in a Hercules MC-130 transport plane. We lost sight of the bomb, but 2 days later, a C-130 took off with a flight plan that brought it to Bangkok via Albania and Tajikistan. We were able to identify the pilot. His name was Feng. He, in turn, had been employed by a criminal based here in Bangkok, a man called Anand Sukit, and he works for Snakehead. Alex finished the sentence. He worked for Snakehead, Miss Jones remarked slowly, until Daniels put 3 bullets into him. It was all beginning to make sense. MI6 special operations were chasing a missing bomb which had led them to Snakehead. Alex was investigating. Snakehead and that had led him to MI6. It was as if they had met in the middle. We were planning to put Daniels into the Snakehead, Miss Jones said. We'd arranged a cover story from him. for him. He was a rich European who'd flown out from London, hoping to put together a big drug deal. Of course, everything changed the moment he spotted you. As soon as we realised you were here, we decided to keep an eye on you and find out what you were up to. I have to say, we were very surprised when you changed your appearance. She had an eye over Alex. If we hadn't seen you at the airport, we wouldn't have recognised you. I like the teeth, Daniels muttered. Come on now, I thought. You said you wanted me to help you. You and I have already penetrated the Snakehead. You've also shaken things up a bit. No surprises there. Maybe you can find a royal beef for us. It shouldn't be too hard to spot, Daniel said. It's bloody huge, and if it goes bang, you'll hear it 10 miles away. I considered getting involved with M6 again was the last thing he wanted to do. But in a way, what Miss Jones had told him changed nothing. He was still working for ASIS, and if he did come across a bomb the size of a family car, there would be no harm in reporting it. What do they want it for? He asked. That's what most worries us, Miss Jones replied. We've got no idea. Obviously, they must be planning something big, but not that big. A nuclear bomb would be able to 1,000 times more powerful. So they're not out to destroy a whole city, Daniels added. But if this is a Scorpio operation, you can be pretty sure it's serious. At large scale, these people aren't bank robbers. You know that better than everyone. I have to admit, we're in the dark. Anything you can find out will be helpful to us. Once again, Alice fell silent, but he had made up his mind. I'll have to tell Ash, she said. Mr. nodded. Don't see any harm in that, and in return we can help you. You and Daniels already know each other. There's no point trying to put him in undercover now, but he can continue to watch over you. Ben smiled. I'd be happy to do that, he said. We can give you something to contact him at any time. Have ASIS provided you with any equipment? Alex shook his head. Miss Jones sighed. That's the trouble with the Australians. They rush into everything without a second thought. Well, we can give you what you will need. Gadgets? Alex's eyes lit up. You've got an old friend here. I think you ought to meet. Smithers was down the corridor in a room that was a cross between a library, an office and a workshop. He was sitting at a desk surrounded by bits of machinery like a destructive child on Christmas Day. There was a half-dismantled alarm clock, a laptop computer with its insides spilling out, an iPad neatly sliced in half, and a tangle of wires and circuits that could have come from almost anything. Smithers himself was wearing sandals, baggy shorts, and a bright yellow short-sleeved shirt. Alex wondered how he could possibly carry so much weight around it in this heat. But he looked perfectly composed, sitting with his great stomach stretching out towards his knees, and two very plump pink legs tucked away below. He was fanning himself with a Chinese fan decorated with two interweaving dragons. Alex? Alex? Is that you? He exclaimed as Alex came into the room. My dear chap, you don't look like yourself at all. Don't tell me you must have spent some time with Claudie Weber. Do you know her? Alex asked. We're old friends. The last time we met was at a party in Athens. We were both disguised as it happened, and we chatted for half an hour before we recognised each other. He smiled. But I can't believe you're back again. So much has happened since I last saw you. That was in America. Did Mastingo Mosquito lotion become useful? Now was Alex's turn to smile. The liquid that Smithers had attracted insects instead of repelling them had been very useful indeed, helping him to get past the checkpoint of Flamingo Bay. It was great, thanks, he said. What are you doing here? Miss Jones asked me to think up a few gadgets for our agents out here in the East. Miss Jones, asked me to think of a few gadgets for agents out here in the East. Smithers replied. He lifted the fan. This is one of them. It's very simple, but I rather like it. You see, it looks like an ordinary fan, but actually there are very thin plates of galvanized steel hidden under the silk. When you bring them together, he folded the fan, then brought it smashing down on the desk, and then word shattered. It becomes a useful weapon. I call it the fan club, Alex suggested. Smith laughed. You're going to use my little ways, he said. Anyway, I've heard all sorts of ideas since I came back from Bangkok. He rifled the surface of the desk and finally found a packet with a dozen sticks of incense. Everyone burns jasmine and musk. It's rather lovely. Everyone burns incense out here, he said. He explained. It comes in jasmine and musk and it's rather lovely, but my incense has no smell at all. So what's the point? After 30 seconds, you'll make a whole room of people throw up. It's quite the most disgusting gadget I've ever invented. And I have to say, we had no fun at all testing it, but it's still quite useful, I think. He unfolded a sheaf of drawings. I'm also working on one of these local 3-wheel taxis. They call them tuk-tuks. This one has got a missile launcher built into the front of the headlight and a machine gun directly controlled by the handlebars. So I suppose you could say it's an attack tuk. What's this? Alex asked. He picked up a small bronze Buddha sitting in the lotus position with its round stomach and bald head. It reminded him of little Smithers. It reminded him a little of Smithers. Oh, do be careful with that, Smithers exclaimed. That's my Buddha hand grenade. Twist their head twice and throw it, and anyone within 10 meters can say their prayers. He took it back and placed it carefully in a drawer. Miss Jones said you take it on the Snakehead, continued. Suddenly he was serious. You be careful, Alex. I know you've done tremendously well in the past, but these people are extremely nasty. I know. I thought back to his first meeting with Adam Swicket with a fight in the riverside arena. He didn't need to be told. There were all sorts of things I'd like to equip you with, Smith said, but as I understand it, you're working on a cover as an Afghan refugee, which means you won't be carrying very much. Is that right? I thought he was disappointed. Smith had once given him a Nintendo DS jammed with special devices, and he would have felt more confident having something like that with him now. Smith opened an old cigar box. The first object he took out was a watch. Excuse me, sorry. A cheap fairground thing on a plastic strap. He handed it to Alex. Alex looked at the time. According to the watch, it was 6:30. He shook it. This doesn't work, he said. We have to think about the psychology. Smith explained. Poor Afghan refugee wouldn't know many possessions, but he would be very proud of the few he did have, even a broken watch. But this watch will work when it matters. It's a powerful transmitter and a battery inside. If you get into trouble, send the hands till 11 o'clock, and it will send out a signal which will repeat every 10 minutes until it runs out of power. We'll be able to pick you up anywhere on the globe. Smith rummaged around the box again and took out 3 coins. I recognized them. They were Thai currency, 1 baht, 5 baht, and 10 baht, worth about 25 pence in total. I don't think anyone would worry about the few local coins, he said. These are rather fun. They're actually miniature explosives. Let me show you how to detonate them. He used a half-empty packet of chewing gum. At least that was what it looked like. Then he turned it round in his pudgy fingers and slid open a secret panel. There were 3 tiny switches on the other side, marked with the figures 1, 5, and 10. This is how it works, he explained. The coins are magnetic, so you can you can stick them to a metal surface. When you want to use them, they won't be activated until you flick the appropriate switch. Just make sure you get the right value. The coins will blow up, or blow open a lock, or even smash a hole in the wall. Think of them as miniature landmines, and do try to not spend them. Thanks, Smithers. And finally, I've got something that might come in very useful. If you find yourself off beaten track, Smithers put open a drawer in the desk, take out an old belt with a heavy silver black buckle. You can slip it into your jeans. There's a particularly sharp knife hidden inside the buckle. It's made out of toughened plastic and it's rather cunningly designed, so it won't show up on X-ray machines. If you go through an airport and if you slice open the belt, you'll find matches, medicines, water purifying tablets, knockout pills. They are guaranteed to work on 11 different varieties of snake. I developed it for use in the jungle. And although you're not heading that way, you never know. He reached up and shook Alex's hand. Good luck, old bean. And one last word of advice. He leaned forward as if afraid of being overheard. I won't trust these Australians if I were you. They're not a bad lot, but they're a bit rough. If you know what I mean, don't play by the rules, just keep your wits around you. He tapped the side of his nose. And call for help the moment you need us. That Ben Daniels is a good chap. He won't let us down. He won't let you down. Alex gathered up his few weapons. As he left, he heard Smithers humming behind him. The song was that old Australian favourite, Waltzing Matilda. I just wonder what Smithers had meant by his warning. Did he really know something that Alex didn't, or was he just being mischievous? Ben Daniels was waiting outside. Are you ready, Cobb? He asked. Armed and dangerous, Alex replied. The two of them left together. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for listening to this.